The wind was a liar. It howled like a wolf, a cruel mimicry of the creatures who had condemned her to this frozen solitude. Alara huddled closer to the meager fire, its flickering light the only thing pushing back the oppressive darkness of the cabin. Outside, the blizzard raged, a physical manifestation of the storm that had lived inside her for 10 long years. This mountain was her cage, this cabin her cell, this endless winter her sentence. She was a creature of neither world, a stain on the purity of two bloodlines. The humans in the valley below had driven her away with torches and silver-laced curses, their fear painting her as a monster. The wolves of the Silver Moon Pack, her father's pack, had cast her out with bared teeth and snarled pronouncements of abomination, a hybrid. Not enough wolf to run with the pack, not enough human to live by the hearth. She was a ghost, haunting the frozen space between two lives she could never claim. The rejection was a brand on her soul, a constant, aching reminder of her worthlessness. They had told her she was nothing, and in the crushing silence of the mountains, she had come to believe it. Her hands, resting on her knees, were a source of perpetual shame. Too slender for a wolf's paws, yet calloused and strong in a way the village women would have scorned. They were hands that could set a trap, skin a rabbit, and stitch a wound, but they could never be held in acceptance. The cold was more than just the mountain air. It seeped into her bones, a permanent chill that no fire could ever truly thaw. It was the cold of absolute loneliness, of knowing that if she were to die here tonight, swallowed by the snow, no one would mourn. No one would even know she was gone. The thought used to terrify her, but now it was just a dull fact, another stone piled onto the cairn of her despair. Tonight, the storm felt different. It was more violent, more personal, as if the mountain itself was trying to claw its way into her sanctuary and snuff out her small, defiant flame of life. The wooden walls of the cabin groaned under the assault, and snow blasted through the tiny cracks around the window frame, dusting the floor in a fine, white powder. She was running low on firewood, and her preserved food stores were dwindling. Survival was a daily battle, a war waged against the elements and her own fading hope. What was she even fighting for? To see another sunrise paint the snow in shades of pink and orange? To feel the brief warmth of the spring thaw? These small moments were beautiful, but they were hollow, witnessed by no one but a girl who wasn't supposed to exist. A sudden, frantic scratching at the door ripped through the howl of the wind. Alara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a branch. It was claws. Her first thought was a bear, woken from its hibernation by some primal fury. Her second, more terrifying thought was wolves. Her old pack. Had they finally decided that exile wasn't enough? Had Kale, the alpha who had looked at her with such visceral disgust, sent his enforcers to finish the job, to erase the shame of her existence from their territory forever? The scratching came again, weaker this time, followed by a low, desperate whine that was almost lost in the storm. It wasn't the sound of aggression. It was the sound of pain, against every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, to protect the fragile peace of her isolation. Alara crept toward the door. The scent of blood, sharp and metallic, cut through the cold air. It was heavy, so much blood. Her hand trembled as she lifted the heavy wooden bar, securing the door. Her mind screamed at her. Fools rush in where wise women hide. They will kill you. They are wolves. They hate what you are. But another voice, a softer one she hadn't heard in years, whispered back. They are hurt. They are dying. She pulled the door open just a crack, peering into the swirling vortex of white. What she saw stole her breath. A wolf pack, or what was left of one, was collapsed in the snow before her small porch. There were at least 5 of them, their fur matted with blood and ice. Their bodies were still, save for the shallow rise and fall of their chests. They were enormous, larger than any wolves she had ever seen from the Silver Moon Pack, their coats ranging from pure white to mottled gray. Standing guard over them, swaying on his feet but refusing to fall, was the largest wolf she could ever have imagined. He was a creature of midnight and shadow, his fur as black as a starless sky, save for the startling silver of his eyes. Those eyes were fixed on her, and in their depths she saw not the feral hunger or cold hatred she expected, but a shocking, desperate intelligence. He was pleading. The great black wolf took a shaky step forward and let out another soft whine, a sound of utter desperation. He was bleeding from a deep, wicked-looking gash on his flank, the dark stains spreading across his fur and melting the snow beneath him. Her heart, a cold and dormant thing, clenched with a pain that was not her own. She saw in them her own desperation, her own fight for survival against a world that wanted to crush them. In that moment, they were not the monsters of her past. They were simply creatures in need, and she was the only one who could help. The decision was made before she was even aware of making it. The years of bitterness and fear crumbled away, replaced by a wave of compassion so fierce it felt like a physical force. She swung the door wide open, the gesture a silent invitation. "Come," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. "Come inside." The great black wolf seemed to understand. He nudged one of his fallen packmates, then another, urging them toward the sliver of warmth and light. Alara stepped back, her small cabin suddenly feeling impossibly crowded as she began the arduous task of dragging the wounded animals out of the blizzard's deadly embrace. The scent of wet fur, pine, and blood filled the small space, a primal aroma of life and death. She worked with a focused intensity, her survival skills taking over. She stoked the fire until it roared, providing a circle of vital warmth. Then, she fetched her stores of moss, dried herbs, and clean cloths. She moved from one wolf to another, her touch gentle but firm. One had a broken leg, which she carefully and expertly set with splints made from firewood. Another had deep claw marks raked across its back. She cleaned each wound with a heated cloth, applying a poultice of yarrow and comfrey to stave off infection and ease the pain. The wolves were unervingly docile, allowing her to tend to them without so much as a growl. They watched her with weary, grateful eyes, their trust a fragile, precious gift. She saved the black wolf for last. He had settled by the fire, never taking his silver eyes off her as she worked. He was a silent, imposing presence, radiating an aura of quiet authority that ached with pain. As she knelt beside him, she could feel the heat rolling off his body, a furnace of contained power. The gash on his flank was worse than she had thought. It was deep, and the edges were tinged with a sickly black, a sure sign of poison. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced her focus. This was beyond her simple remedies. Without proper care, he would die before morning. "I have to clean it," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "It's going to hurt." He simply blinked slowly, a sign of understanding and consent. Her hands trembled as she prepared a fresh cloth and the strongest antiseptic she had, a bitter brew of willow bark and marsh root. To get the poultice deep enough to work, she would have to press her bare hands directly into the wound. The thought of touching him so intimately, of feeling the lifeblood of a creature like those who had tormented her, sent a shiver of old fear down her spine. But one look at his silver eyes, filled with pained endurance and unwavering trust, solidified her resolve. She was no longer the rejected outcast. She was a healer. This was her purpose tonight. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she placed one hand on his fur to steady him and gently pressed the medicated cloth into the wound with the other. The moment her skin made contact with his, the world exploded. It was not a spark. It was a bolt of lightning, a supernova of pure energy that shot up her arm and straight into her soul. The cabin, the storm, the other wolves, it all vanished. She was adrift in a sea of golden light, and a single, shimmering thread was weaving itself from the core of her being to the core of his. She heard a sound, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated through her very bones, a sound of shock, of agony, and of profound, earth-shattering recognition. She snatched her hand back as if burned, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. She stared, wide-eyed, at the giant wolf. His silver eyes were blazing now, glowing with an inner light. A tremor racked his massive frame, and then, before her disbelieving eyes, the impossible happened. Bones cracked and popped, shifting and elongating. Fur receded like a shadow at sunrise, revealing pale, muscle-corded skin. The feral snout softened and reshaped into the hard, aristocratic lines of a human face. In seconds, the great black wolf was gone. Kneeling in his place was a man. He was naked, his body a tapestry of scars old and new, his broad shoulders and powerful chest heaving as he gasped for air. The poison wound on his side was still bleeding, but it was the only thing that seemed real in the surreal tableau. He looked up at her, and she found herself drowning in the same silver eyes, now set in a face of rugged, breathtaking beauty. They held ancient wisdom, immense power, and an emotion she had never seen directed at her before: reverence. He reached out a hand, his fingers brushing her cheek with a tenderness that made her flinch. "Mate," he breathed, the single word a sacred vow, a seismic shift that cracked the foundations of her broken world. The other wolves in the room began to stir, their forms shimmering and changing until 5 other warriors knelt around them, their heads bowed to the man before her. He was not just a wolf. He was their alpha. "Who? What are you?" Alara stammered, scrambling backward until her back hit the rough-hewn wall of the cabin. The man pushed himself to his feet, his powerful form seeming to dwarf the small room. He didn't move to cover himself, his nudity as natural and commanding as a king's robes. "My name is Leekin," he said, his voice a low, melodic rumble that seemed to calm the very air. "And I am the Alpha King of all packs." Alara could only stare, her mind struggling to process the information. The Alpha King, a figure of myth and legend, a ruler so powerful he was spoken of in whispers even in the most remote territories. He was supposed to be a phantom, a god among wolves, not a wounded man bleeding on her cabin floor. "Rogues," he explained, his gaze never leaving hers. "A coordinated ambush. They used poison blades. My royal guard fought them off, but we were separated from the main pack, wounded. We ran for days, the storm covering our scent. We were dying." His silver eyes softened. "The moon goddess guided us here. To you, to me," she whispered, the word tasting like ash. "But I am nothing. An outcast. A hybrid." Leekin took a step closer, his presence so immense it felt like a physical pressure. "You are not nothing," he said, his voice laced with a fierce conviction that defied her years of self-hatred. "The moment our skin touched, the bond ignited. It is the most sacred connection known to our kind, a bond forged by destiny itself. You, Alara, are my fated mate, my other half, my queen." The word was so foreign, so ludicrous, she almost laughed. Her a queen? A girl who foraged for roots and wore patched-up clothes made from deer hide? A creature reviled by both her peoples? It was impossible. Yet, the feeling inside her, the golden thread that still hummed between them, told her it was true. The storm outside began to subside as dawn approached, its fury spent. But a new storm was brewing on the horizon. A familiar scent tainted the clean morning air, carried on the wind, the scent of the silver moon pack. Her old pack, her tormentors. Leekin stiffened, his head snapping toward the door. His guards, now clothed in spare furs Alara had provided, rose to their feet, their expressions hardening into grim masks of battle readiness. "They are here," he stated, his voice dropping to a low growl. Fear, cold and familiar, coiled in Alara's stomach. Kale. He had found her. He had come to finish what he started. The cabin door was thrown open, not with a knock, but with the splintering crack of a booted foot. Kale stood on the threshold, his second-in-command flanking him. He was just as she remembered, arrogant, cruel, his eyes filled with a casual disdain that had haunted her nightmares. His gaze swept the room, widening in shock and then fear as he saw the royal guards. His eyes finally landed on Leekin, and he paled, dropping into a clumsy, terrified bow. "Your Majesty," he stammered. We tracked the scent of rogues. We came to offer our aid. Kale's eyes then found Alara, cowering behind Leekin. A sneer twisted his lips. Abomination, he spat, the old insult a reflex. What is this filth doing in the presence of the king? She should be put down. Before Alara could even flinch, Leekin moved. He was a blur of motion, crossing the room and grabbing Kale by the throat, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. The air crackled with raw, unrestrained power. You will address her, Leekin snarled, his voice a deadly whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. As Luna Queen, he threw Kale to the floor. The alpha of the Silver Moon pack scrambled backward, choking and gasping. She is the hybrid, he wheezed, disbelief warring with terror in his eyes. She is worthless. Her worth is something your pathetic, power-hungry mind could never comprehend. Leekin boomed, his voice echoing with the command of a true king. I was dying. My pack was dying. We came to this door seeking mercy, and this woman, this abomination you cast out into a frozen wasteland, gave it without hesitation. She showed more honor, more compassion, and more strength in one night than your entire pack has shown in a generation. He turned his burning gaze on Alara, holding out his hand. She did not see a wolf. She saw a soul in pain. Her hybrid blood is not a curse. It is a bridge. It is a gift of empathy that you were too blind to see. Trembling, Alara took his hand. His fingers wrapped around hers, warm and strong, a perfect anchor in the maelstrom of her emotions. Standing beside him, she felt not small but amplified. The shame that had been her constant companion for a decade began to recede, replaced by a tentative, budding warmth. You rejected her, Leekin continued, his voice dropping to a chilling calm as he turned back to Kale. You cast out the greatest treasure the goddess could have bestowed upon these lands. For this, your pack is stripped of its name. You will be known as the Rejected, and you will vacate these mountains by sundown. You are banished. Kale and his wolf stared, their faces a mask of utter humiliation and defeat. Without another word, they turned and fled, their shame trailing behind them like a tattered flag. The morning sun streamed through the open door, bathing the small cabin in a gentle, golden light. The storm was over. Leekin turned to Alara, his expression softening, his silver eyes filled with a devotion so profound it made her ache. They were wrong, he said softly, cupping her face in his hands. They saw weakness because they were weak. I see strength. I see a queen with the heart of a healer and the soul of a survivor. You are not worthless, Alara. You are priceless. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in her life, they were not tears of sorrow or loneliness. They were tears of release, of acceptance, of a hope so bright it was almost painful to behold. The cold that had lived in her bones for so long was finally, truly beginning to thaw. The humble cabin was no longer her prison. It was the sanctuary where her king had found her, the place where an outcast hybrid had been reborn as a Luna Queen. He lowered his head, his lips brushing hers in a promise of a new life, a new kingdom, and a new home, found not in a place, but in the heart of her mate. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story of love and vindication touched your heart, please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing to our channel for more tales of fated mates and powerful destinies, and leaving a comment below to let us know your favorite part. We can't wait to read what you think.